Hello, this is your instructor, Alice Shapiro, with you again. This is an overview of Chapter 6, the Skeletal System. Your homework this week has homework for you to identify bones of the skull and the rest of the skeletal system, as well as muscles. These are the bones and muscles for which you are responsible. So I am not going to talk about each and every bone in this overview. I'm going to talk about the structure and function of the skeletal system as a whole. Okay, the functions of the skeletal system are for support, protection. Major organs are surrounded by components of the skeletal system. Movement. Without the joints of your skeletal system and their muscles which are attached, we would not be able to move. Storage. We store calcium in our bones as well as other minerals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Blood cell production. Red blood cell production occurs in the red bone marrow via a process called hematopoiesis. All right, let's move on to the next slide. This is not moving as I thought it would. There we go. The components of the skeletal system are bone, which we will discuss a little bit more later. Cartilage. Cartilage is a type of connective tissue, and it is designed to reduce friction. For example, our patella is formed of cartilage. The articulations between bones are formed of cartilage. Tendons, which attach bone to muscle, and ligaments, which attach bone to bone. Make sure you understand these definitions. Bones, cartilage, tendons, and ligaments, as I mentioned, are classified as connective tissues. Also, a component of bone, which is kind of the matrix background material, are called proteoglycans, which are large polysaccharide that are attached also to proteins. And they not only are part of the ground substance for bones to which the minerals can attach, but they also store water to some degree. Bones are classified based on their shape and the type of bone tissue. Here's the structure of a typical long bone. Actually, this is a diagram of the femur, and it is a young bone. It's classified as a young bone because the epiphyseal plates are the sites of bone growth, and if you look at this and read about this, you will see that this area, the epiphyseal plates, are formed of cartilage as the bone is growing. Bone cells themselves, or osteocytes, bone cells themselves, osteocytes, do not grow, they cannot divide. Rather, bone grows via cartilage, and cartilage cells divide, and the cartilage then becomes ossified or replaced by bone. Here are some of the major areas of a long bone. Please take a look at these and understand what they mean and these basic parts of the structure of a long bone. This is more detail showing you the epiphyseal plates or site of growth and where they are located, and the medullary or marrow cavity. Notice it also contains red and or yellow marrow. Yellow marrow is fat tissue for reducing friction and stress as you use your bones, walk, jump, and so forth. The periosteum is the membrane that surrounds the bone, and the endosteum is the membrane of the inner surface or the medullary cavity of the bone. Bone cells are called osteocytes in the mature bone. Osteoblasts are actually the cells that can build new bone by excreting fibers. Osteoclasts actually break down old bone and therefore carve and help to reshape bone. Make sure you review and understand the functions of each of these bone cells. Bone formation is called ossification, and it begins to occur in utero when the fetus is developing. The osteoblast has a role in building bone, and after an osteoblast becomes surrounded by the bone matrix that it creates, it is now called and becomes an osteocyte. There is a type of ossification or bone formation called intramembranous bone formation, where the bone actually forms within the connective tissue. The skull bones primarily are formed this way. Here is a diagram of intramembranous bone formation. This is in your textbook. Make sure you take a look at this diagram. All right, so this is showing bone that it is forming in the connective tissue in utero, and when a newborn is first born, the skull is not totally ossified. The areas we call fontanelles are the connective tissues that have not yet been ossified. Endochondral bone formation or endochondral ossification occurs after a bone has been modeled first as cartilage. Most of the bones in our bodies are formed in this fashion except for the skull bones. And here are some of the steps. You need to go and read this. Again, I'm not going to read it to you right now. It would take too long. And take a look at the steps. Here it is diagrammatically. A model of the bone is formed in cartilage, and then the cartilage is remodeled and replaced by bone. And these diagrams do a very good job of showing you the steps. These diagrams are also located in your textbook, and of course you can review them here as well as on the non-narrated PowerPoint that is available in Moodle for you. And this shows you some more of the steps, how the chondrocytes, which are the cartilage cells, divide and enlarge and then are replaced by bone, or we could say become ossified. Bone growth. This shows you in infancy and youth, long bones lengthen at the epiphyseal plate, and they widen by adding more layers, or lamella. All right, when the epiphyseal plate is totally replaced by bone, the cartilage is replaced by bone, then growth of the long bones stops. And here is an example now. The epiphyseal plate, which used to be cartilage, is ossified. We can still see the remnant of this in long bones, which we call the epiphyseal line. And here is another example of a growing bone versus an adult bone. This articular cartilage remains as a remnant of the cartilage model of bone, and this occurs at the joints. As I said, the cartilage helps to reduce the friction as we move and as our joints move. Bone remodeling is performed by osteoclasts as they carve out or chew up existing bone, and new bone is deposited by the osteoblasts. These cells are actually the same cell doing different jobs, and then once they become surrounded by bone, they are the actual osteocytes. Notice that they are also responsible for calcium ion regulation. When calcium in the blood is low, the osteoclasts will actually chew up bone, we could say, and release calcium into the bloodstream. So the bones are very involved in calcium homeostasis. The osteoblasts and osteoclasts, when calcium is high in our blood, osteoblasts will take the calcium to build bone. When calcium is low, the osteoclasts will break the bone down, and they are regulated by the parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. All right, this shows you the functions of these hormones. And again, take a look at these diagrams and ask me any questions via Moodle messaging if you are not clear about how this process occurs. Again, I'm not going to read this to you. I think the diagrams are good to show you the progression and the site of these hormones. Hematopoietic tissue is tissue that forms red blood cells located in the red bone marrow primarily. This is a view of some of the bones of the pectoral girdle and the upper limb. I'm not going to tell you the names of these bones. As I mentioned, you have in your homework all of the assignments that you will need and the bones that you need to memorize and make sure you can identify. This tells you the names of the bones of the lower limb. Here's an example of the lower limb. What are articulations? These are joints where two bones come together. There are non-movable joints called synarthrosis, slightly movable joints called amphiarthrosis, and freely movable joints called diarthrosis. There are some examples here of the types of movements that can happen. Take a look at these. Here are examples of how these movements are accomplished. Again, these are from your textbook, so it will be easy for you to go back and review. And here is a complete skeleton, much like the one you will be asked to identify as your homework. And you may see some of these identifications appearing on your next exam. Again, this was a brief overview, and I expect to hear from you via messaging if you have any questions. And I hope this has helped to clarify some of the issues and highlights of these sections for you. Happy studying, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.